Okay, I am here off the Emmitsburg Road, and today we're going to do a video on Secrets of the Battlefield, a place that does not exist anymore that once did from 1962 to 1983. And that would be the Fort Defiance Museum and Frontier Village, and then later Slippy Dipping. Now, this museum was owned by a man named Clyde G. Culver here of Gettysburg. The museum opened in 1962, and it had a HO scale diorama, had a small hill called Boot Hill, which we're standing on now, behind it with tombstones, and it had a frontier town that was built around it. It also featured this water slide, which I'm standing on here now. We're going to begin, as we continue the video, to walk down the water slide that many of you who are old enough may have slid down years ago in the 60s and 70s. Now, the water slide was added later, where kids in the building could slide down the outside here toward the road. Now, the museum itself, which you see in front of us, the basement contained the diorama. On the second floor, or the ground level floor, was an exhibit with stuffed animals. And then the third floor was the frontier or Western history part of the museum. Outside here, on the outside of the building and behind the building, it featured a barbershop, a saloon, a jail, a post office, funeral parlor, Amish buggy out front, a guard tower. And again, just after the Battle of Gettysburg, relic hunters began to come to Gettysburg, and souvenir shops picked up. And there's always been this preservation conversation, versus the tourist attraction here at Gettysburg. And this was one of them. It was actually called a tourist trap at one time, and this is about as far as we're going to be able to walk, as it's getting pretty prickly here. But this was the water slide part of the museum. And as I was saying, right after the Battle of Gettysburg, as people began to hunt for relics off the battlefield, there was this huge draw to come to Gettysburg, and also for businesses to capitalize on the battle itself. Late 1800s, early 1900s, many souvenir shops and stands began to pop up, and as preservationists seek to control and remove these places, Gettysburg also became a tourist destination. Now today, across the street is the Eisenhower Inn and Conference Center and the Aspire Hotel and Suites. So this kind of gives you an idea of where Fort Defiance was. Now, Fort Defiance, the museum itself, existed from 1962 till August the 9th, 1976. And then it closed down for some time. It was reopened, still under the name Fort Defiance, but with a new name as well, called Slippy Dipping, which the remains of the sign still sit out here on the Emmitsburg Road. In 1976, Slippy Dipping went for a patented name, which they received. And they stayed in business until they filed Section 8 bankruptcy on November the 22nd, 1983, officially closing this museum forever. Of course, there is the employee shack here, out in front of the museum. For people who grew up in the 60s and early 70s, this was a destination where they would go, one of their souvenir shops or small museums like we have today in town. This is a spot that they would stop here for historians that didn't preserve accuracy in the battlefield or promote the education of the battle itself. After the death of Mr. Culver, the property was turned over to the National Park Service, in which it resides today. So I would imagine sometime in the future, as the building begins to deteriorate and the park gets funding, they'll probably end up tearing it down, and its memory will be no more. Thus, I'm doing a video today to give its precise location here off the Emmetsburg Road. Again, as of 2013, the 150th anniversary of the battle, it is located here at 2661 Emmetsburg Road. You can still see the slippy dipping sign, and of course the deteriorating building and water slide off to the right. This has been Secrets of the Battlefield, the Fort Defiance Museum and Frontier Village, and Slippy Dipping on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. Of the 9th Massachusetts Battery under Captain John Bigelow. They were engaged here on July 2nd, 1863. Originally, Captain Bigelow's guns were positioned in an area just behind your camera here, to the back, right about where the sun is at now. Now, on the afternoon of the 2nd of 1863, those guns were forced as Longstreet and some men under Longstreet, some Carolinians and some Mississippians, made it in this direction, this area, this direction here of the Abraham Trossel house, which is there to the right. As they came into this area, Captain John Bigelow and his 9th Massachusetts Battery of 6 guns were positioned in this area here, under very, very heavy fire. In fact, originally he was going to retreat from this position, but he was asked to keep this position at all possible cost, and it did buy the Union Army some desperate time. It was at this time when General Sickles had advanced his line from that direction over there, which the main federal line was through Little Round Top. He advanced without permission his line to this point here, and beyond this point to our right, in the direction of that tree there, and beyond to the peach orchard. Now, where that tree is, that was actually the site of General Sickles' headquarters. That is one of the few remaining witness trees that are on the battlefield, or trees that were in existence during the battle and still here today. And just in the area of this barn over here, this is the Abraham Trossel barn, and you can see the big hole in the top where it was hit by a shell. Just on the other side of that barn is actually the spot where General Sickles was wounded and lost his leg. Eventually, this position was lost. Those Carolina and Mississippi soldiers took this position and captured these guns. One thing that people really don't know about this area is, if you follow me, soldiers like to name their guns. This gun here, if you come back here and you look behind the gun, this gun's name is Cora, and they still keep the name Cora on this gun to this very day. And of course, just to the right of the gun is the 2nd position marker for the 9th Massachusetts Battery under Captain Bigelow. So that here was your tour of the day from the Abraham Trossel farm and the position of the 9th Massachusetts Battery. So we'll go ahead and cut now, and I thank you for watching our videos. Standing here at Marsh Creek in the southern part of Gettysburg, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the area of Gettysburg. The first known inhabitants of what we know today of Gettysburg were Native American Indians who settled here about 7,000 years ago. They settled along this creek here, being Marsh Creek, and they also settled in the Rock Creek area north of town, which was the McAllister's Mill area of Gettysburg, which is today right off of Route 97. Here they settled along the shores of this creek here, and up there they actually settled in caves, which were actually large boulders that were called wind caves, and they provided like what we would call fan or air conditioning today. And those caves actually existed till about 30 years ago, when a local construction company came in and destroyed them. But the modern civilization of Gettysburg in the late 16, early 1700s settled in this area that we're standing in right now, which is Marsh Creek. Originally, we know as Gettysburg today was called the Marsh Creek Settlement, and a settlement of early Americans settled in this area here. I believe they were German. Again, at the banks on this very beautiful and scenic creek. Later on, of course, the Marsh Creek Settlement, after William Penn got this state, which we know today as Pennsylvania, and divvied out the Manor of Mask, which were colonies or areas of acreage in the state of Pennsylvania that were prime areas, including where we're standing right now. Later, Marsh Creek Settlement became Gettystown when James Samuel Geddes were here, and then, of course, later on Gettysburg. The founder of Gettysburg, the borough being James Geddes. And you can go back and see my videos that I've done on the James Geddes, the former site of the James Geddes house, as well as James Geddes' grave in Evergreen Cemetery. But Gettysburg, as we know it today, all got its start here in ancient settlements about 7,000 years ago with native Indians, and then, of course, the modern population, which here on this beautiful creek called Marsh Creek, settled along the banks of this creek here in the late 16, early 1700s. At that time, it was called the Marsh Creek Settlement. Then it was Gettystown, and then finally Gettysburg. This has been the early settlements of Gettysburg on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. Pine Bank Cemetery in Gettysburg, and this is one of the oldest and probably one of the least known about cemeteries in Gettysburg. It sits between Route 97, which is the Baltimore Pike going this way, and then 15 South goes this way, and of course you got Route 134, the Taneytown Road. It sits between 97 and 134. The best way to get here is to take Route 15 South, get off at the 134 exit, make a left, or head what I would consider southbound, and then as soon as you cross over the 15 overpass, you see Solomon Road on your left. You make a left on Solomon Road, go about a mile, and you're going to find Cemetery Road. Cemetery Road's a dead end, the dead end being this cemetery. It's a very old cemetery. There's burials here in the very early 1800s, 30, 40, 50 years before the Civil War. And it's a very beautiful and serene place. You never see visitors out here in the cemetery. A lot of the headstones are the old carved soft stone that you've seen back in the 1700s, and a lot of the people that are buried here are buried in unmarked graves, as well as graves that no longer have stones, or stones that are so dilapidated that you cannot read them anymore. Most of them are toppled over. And it's a very picturesque cemetery. You can see for miles and miles, and you can see the round tops back here in the distance. There is one particular grave that I want to point out in the cemetery, and it sits over here, and it's because it was a local boy named Gwynn. His name was Emery M. Gwynn, and he was the son of George and Elizabeth Gwynn, and he served in the 138th Pennsylvania Company B, which was a local company out of Gettysburg here in Adams County. He was born in 1844. He was wounded in 1864 at the Battle of Monocacy, or the battle that saved Washington, as they like to call it. He died on July 22nd, 1864, and he was just 20 years old. And this is his grave here, the grave of Emery M. Gwynn, here at Pine Bank Cemetery, which again is probably one of the least visited cemeteries, and maybe not even that well known about. It's very few visitors. I've been out here a few times, and never once have I been in the cemetery and seen even a car or anything. On the cemetery road, which comes off of Solomon Road right over here, it just comes about 3/4 of a mile down and dead ends here in the cemetery. It is the home and final resting places of Revolutionary War veterans as well as Civil War veterans. And again, it goes back probably to the early 1800s, 1809, 1810. So it definitely was here during the Battle of Gettysburg. There is no caretakers for the cemetery. There's no office for the cemetery. You may be able to find some of the graves registered on maybe a site like findagrave.com. Again, there's very little known about the cemetery, but as I was walking through it today, I did notice the grave of Emory Gwynn, who was in Company B of the 138th Pennsylvania. Of course, the 138th Pennsylvania did not fight here at the Battle of Gettysburg, but they were a local group of boys from Gettysburg, so this was their hometown. Of course, they were engaged at the Battle of Monocacy, where Emory Gwynn was severely and mortally wounded. His leg was amputated up to just below the knee. And then he died on July 22nd, 1864. This has been the Pine Bank Cemetery and the grave of Emory M. Gwynn, Company B, 138th Pennsylvania, on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook.